Oh, time travel, you've gotta love it. For all the zaniness it allows and all the delicious questions it inevitably opens up. The cutie remark actually defied my expectations and was a really enjoyable closeout to Season 5 of MLP. I don't think anyone was surprised when Starlight Glimmer showed up again, as we've all been basically waiting for that all season, and the time travel also wasn't a surprise either, considering it was referenced at the end of Equestria Girls 3 when Pony Twi pops through the portal at the end of the movie. Gee, thanks for letting us know months in advance this will all turn out fine. I think probably the most interesting concept in the episode was how it painted Equestria in so many bleak states. For a show that for its most part is incredibly happy and upbeat, and very rarely wanders into dark territory, having all these doomsday scenarios given a bit of screen time was really fascinating. I think I'm not alone when I say that the first reality with the war with Sombra was probably the most interesting because it was given the most context. Having Rarity, the prim and proper designer, ship off for the war, and even the fact that the show brought something like War into the fold was crazy tonal contrast, which while entirely the point to drive home the narrative importance of the Rainboom, it was also fascinating in and of itself, seeing characters we're familiar with downtrodden and exhausted by conflict, and Rainbow Dash with a prosthetic wing. It was just an interesting lens to view the series through, especially coming from an official source. Seeing all the big baddies get a spot where they triumph was certainly interesting, and honestly was a big part of why I was okay with this episode, despite the fact that I enjoyed the Sombraverse so much more than the rest. I have no idea why, but time travel episodes like this, where they change the main cast and force you to sit through alternate interpretations of these characters, never sat all too well with me, even when I was a kid. I honestly couldn't explain why that is, and when I told Paleo about this, he kind of pressed me for details that I just couldn't provide, but I guess it's because the show is asking me to get invested in versions of these characters that I know aren't going to stick, and I just kind of become impatient, tapping my feet while waiting for things to inevitably revert to normal. A completely personal and in all honesty stupid tick, but it's there nonetheless. So the fact that we only got slight glimpses and didn't stick around too much made for interpretations of these characters in alternate timelines that never outstayed their welcome, present long enough just to drive home the stakes at play in the current conflict, along with some fan service that didn't feel shoehorned. In that case, I guess the only real head scratcher for me in this episode was why Starlight felt it was necessary to leave the spell parchment behind for Twilight to find. I mean, I know they try and make a point to say that Starlight wanted to kind of torture Twilight with her repeated attempts and failing, but at the same time, giving her this opportunity is what leads to her undoing. By simply taking the spell with her, she would have had 0% chance of failure. Arrogance comes before a fall, I suppose. It just seemed that someone like Starlight would be a bit more tactical than that. But then again, rage does blind one, I suppose. Kind of on a related note, I was also confused as to why all this time bamboozling doesn't have any effect on Twilight herself. We see her jump into all these various timelines where everything is fucked up, yet she herself, and more importantly her cutie mark, remain unaffected. It doesn't seem to imply that the world she's falling into are realities parallel to her own, but other possible outcomes of a singular reality when this single event is altered in subtly different ways. Why there are so many vastly different outcomes to the main six not getting their marks also kinda confused me. I gotta wonder how the regular denizens of Ponyville were able to overcome Nightmare Moon and allow the rest of the villains to even enter the fray. But regardless, the beginning of these episodes reaffirms that all the main six are linked by the Rainboom. So if one doesn't get their mark, shouldn't they all not get them, Twilight included? But for some reason, she's immune. I suppose because without her plot armor to the spell, there'd be no episode? Hell, not only that, but if she never got her mark, she'd never have ruined Starlight's utopia, which means Starlight would never have gone back in time to alter anything in the first place, which means everything would happen as normally, which means Twilight does fuck over Starlight's utopia, and Starlight does go into the past, and does prevent the Rainboom, and does alter time, which then means she never goes back in time, which means she does, which means she doesn't. Okay, maybe it's for the better that Twilight is immune, even if this doesn't make sense. Like I said, time travel, it opens up quite the can of worms. The resolution of this whole episode was a bit of a mixed bag for me, an example of great concept, clumsy execution. The fact that Starlight is proven here to basically be a better magic user than Twilight, ignoring the ridiculous of that notion and running with it, and essentially coming up with a foolproof plan, only to be shown the repercussions of her actions and coming to terms with things on her own was a really cool idea. Too bad the shift in perspective happens at lightning speed, which softens the impact a bit, though I will say the super desaturated wasteland the conversation takes place in is a great contrast to the color-laden palette the show usually uses, especially bright, colorful Cloudsdale, where we just were prior. And we once again get the I didn't get that friendship was an option kind of deal that we've already had with Sunset Shimmer, Moon Dancer, and even Twilight herself. At this point, I get it. Friends solve everything. Would it really be that hard to have a tragic backstory that didn't revolve around friendship as a problem? I mean, maybe that's asking too much from a show subtitled Friendship is Magic, but a man can dream, right? Interestingly now, though, is that the final musical number seems to imply that Starlight might be joining our main cast. She doesn't set off on her own path or on her own journey. It would be very interesting if come season 6 she ends up being the so-called 6th Ranger, or 7th Pony in this case, and play a prominent role in the show going forward, or perhaps even that upcoming MLP theatrical film. You know, speaking of that film, we now have Twilight Sparkle, Sunset Shimmer, and Starlight Glimmer, all three powerful magic users, all with similar names that refer to the transition of night and day, which just happen to reflect the namesakes and domains of the two diarchs of this fantasy world and a theatrical release coming up in 2017. Draw your own conclusions, but I'm just saying. So overall, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this finale. I was hesitant going in, but I enjoyed the 45 minutes spent, and I'll be interested to see how this affects season 6 in the upcoming movie, if at all. Before I go, I just want to take this moment to thank all my wonderful patrons on Patreon who make videos like this possible. Without these people's generous support, this channel wouldn't be a thing, and these videos wouldn't be made. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Twisted Prism, who edited this video far better than I could have. So if you see these guys in the comments, give them some love. If you like this video and or this channel and want to help keep it going, and be on this list too, click the link in the description below to check out my Patreon. Anything you can do for me is highly, highly appreciated. And that's all I got for this video. Give it a thumbs up if you thought it was good, or give it a thumbs down if you thought it friggin' sucked. Let me know what your thoughts are on the Season 5 finale, Season 5 as a whole, and what your impressions and ideas for the upcoming movie might be in the comments. I'll be joining in the discussion below. Till next time, I'm Tommy Oliver. Stay curious. You understand.